Greetings everyone. Have a nice Saturday evening everyone. Vector T13 is with you and you pleasantly surprised me. To be honest, I thought that at most we would reach only 200 people. How many do we have now? If you look, they already write that we have limits on our room. Unfortunately, all 500 people, all 500 places are occupied. Well, give or take one seat is constantly freed up. So, alas, those who did not have time will be able to listen and watch this webinar in recording. Well, I welcome everyone who is present here. And let's start our today's webinar. I warn you right away. There will be a lot of water, a lot of information that needs to be brought to you in such a way that you can understand and analyze it. Well, and a little practice. I will also try, since tonight, I repeat, is Saturday evening, not to detain you long. And our webinar will take only 1 hour. Well, then there will be answers to questions. Literally also 30-40 minutes. Our chat is moderated in order to avoid advertising bots that attack my Telegram chats. Therefore, whoever asks the first question will receive the first answer to it. Well, let's start our webinar. Our main topic today is Gmail. Gmail and the changes that have occurred not only in the Google ecosystem, but also in the ecosystem of virtually all major anti-fraud systems. And how to deal with it? Because in fact now there are very few options. Well, users have very few options. And first of all, everything is connected, of course, with the Chrome update. Update of Chromium, which is a trendsetter in anti-fraud systems. And we need to consider what can be done about it, how to make our work absolutely effective, or how to make it at least a little more effective temporarily. But before we get to our main topic, a little bit of news. First news for today. Anti-Detect 5. Personal versions. Redaction 5.15.1a. Available on the detect.expert website. The only thing is that in the personal version of type number 1 and 2 will be added tonight. Unfortunately, there is a lot of work and we did not have time to meet the deadline. All other users can already download their updates. And as soon as we publish the version of type number 1 and type number 2, we will publish the change log as well, because it is really huge. We have added, I will only briefly tell you so, we added a webcam, we added a new proxy system, completely destroyed the old Nekorai, and took one small step forward to building our own proxy system. In this case, it is represented by a modified proxifier called Tron inside the virtual machine itself. Some changes to the network card itself have also been added. Plus, new device models have been added. Plus, new drivers have been added. Plus, what else was there? Wait a second. A lot of stuff. Indeed, such an epic update turned out to be a very big one. The changelog will be about 20 points, and in addition, in this update, in fact, they did everything to ensure that your Gmail works adequately and without SMS. Well, today we will also analyze why not only Gmail is important to you, but also other anti-fraud systems. But in fact, if you manage to bypass Gmail, the rest of the systems will be absolutely easy for you. And of course, I would like to say a little more about Anti-Detect, about the camera, and further updates. As I said in the Patreon chat, we expect an epic update for GeoComply users by the end of the month. It will not be posted on the detect.expert web resource, it will be issued personally to each user. This is due to the epic update, again with the next updates from GeoGuard, whose product is more precisely, which is a product of GeoComply. Well, For those who don't know, it's for working with Wi-Fi positioning, geolocation. A very specific topic and extremely complex. Next, webcam. At the moment, we have implemented a camera that works only with photos. That is, the video is not yet available. I will explain why. Because I had no experience writing drivers for working with webcam before. And in fact, Oracle has helped us a lot. They released their update, the VirtualBox 722 update, in which they gave the source code for their camera implementation. But the only problem was that this implementation of the camera, it is only available to throw your physical camera inside the virtual machine. I did it a little differently. I've made the emulation in such a way that the entire image stream is completely replaced. But at the moment, I managed to take only a photo, that is, in other words, you will not be able to upload the video. But literally, it's a matter of 7 and 10 days, and it will be possible to upload videos. Also, what I would like to say is how this camera differs from all the others or from everyone's favorite OBS. The fact is that this camera uses a completely authentic image construction, the same as on the cameras of the G-Tech family. In the future, we will add other webcam manufacturers. But I'll explain why it's incredibly important. The thing is, when you send an image through the studio, for example, how does that happen? There is an image that has already been built. It exists, figuratively speaking. Let's imagine it in the form of a bot array. You have it on your PC. Using various forensics technologies, it is possible to determine with the help of which device it was theoretically used. This image was created by the OBS transmits the image without actually any modification. If we are talking about photos, if we are talking about videos, they modify the video, make a little changes thanks to the use of a certain codec. And, accordingly, on the other side, on the side of the company's client, there is an opportunity to determine the use of OBS Studio. Or the fact that this photo was taken, for example, relatively speaking, on an iPhone and not on a real webcam. So we fixed this moment, but again, so far we will add only a photo video in the very near future. So news number 2. For those who are going to attend one of the biggest technology events in the current quarter. Kitex Dubai. You can always contact the support, my support, anti-support in order to get free invitations in some cases, and in other cases, meet with me, drink beer, and have a great time. Because I'm not present at this conference as a lecturer, I am present at 2 roundtables, and I am present as a delegate from Vector 13 Technologies. But in any case, who will run by? Keep in touch. I apologize, right, we will talk, smoke, or drink tequila. Well, now the epic of the event. CryptoCard detect.expert. I don't know how long it took me to implement this project, but the idea for it has been nurtured for a very long time. For those who remember, we had a project 13.p. It was a handshake domain, a virtual bank. And this virtual bank made it possible to issue virtual cards. But, alas, we ran into certain limits at that time, because it was a completely new experience for me. I'm still a techie, not a financier. And the project existed very well, but in fact did not receive mass support. Let me explain why. Because big, let's say, people with a lot of money, they said, why do you need to sell at retail? Sell me everything in bulk. Well, as a matter of fact, I didn't really mind. But this project 13p had its own certain architectural features, and as a result of which, literally, in June of this year, I completely sold it. I don't have this project, I have nothing to do with it. Do our friends from China have to manage this project? I think they are satisfied. Well, for all other users, in order for everyone to be happy, we are launching a virtual crypto card service. That is, what is it? On the detect.expert website, you register an account without going through any Know Your Customer because we believe you. I personally believe each of you. You can register the number of credit cards you need. Actually, you can replenish them through the detect.expert account of any cryptocurrency that we support and accordingly make payments on the internet. I will immediately answer a few of the most popular questions that were asked. Number of bins? Releasing a new bin is not a problem at all. That is, for us, it costs only, if I'm not mistaken, 3,000 euros. So, as soon as we see good interest from users, okay, we're going to launch a large number of bins. Plus, if it's quite possible, if someone needs their personal bin, for example, or their personal set, okay, you can purchase through us. But again, these funds are primarily multi-accounting tools. We do not encourage you to keep a lot of money in accounts and so on, but you can pay in any merchants because there are no restrictions on our part. This bank is real, it is not virtual. Well, literally after the launch in the near future, we will add the ability to add these cards to Apple Pay and Samsung Pay, and of course, first we will start with Samsung. Alas, because Apple Pay imposes many more certification restrictions, but in any case, it is not a problem. Because unfortunately, there are very few such services. I know literally that there are probably not even a dozen services that provide this kind of service. And perhaps, who knows, such a service was born because people need it. Now, wherever you spit, you fucking know your customer. I remember how when I was still living in Pederlandia, I wanted to buy a TV for myself. I went and they asked me, because the amount was large, they asked me, and provide us with an extract from the place of work to buy a TV. Bitch, it's fucked. And here, in the place where I am now, I came, yes, anything. Go buy yourself a bomber, the main thing is to pay for it, and then do what you want with it. Freedom! This is freedom and not all the liberal that is fed to us. So once again, I will welcome you all to the detect.expert website. The launch of the cards is planned for next week. Now the final preparations are underway. Preparations probably need to be said correctly. Now the final preparations are underway because you really don't want to face any kind of problems, so a whole staff of CUA testers is working. So let's hope that everything will be okay and you will get an incredibly cool experience from this unique service which will have no equal. So let's move on. Let's move on to another important news. This is epic news, well, almost like detect.expert's cards. Okay, let's go back. So, I want to take you on a little excursion in 2023. In 2023, together with the company CyberYoj, I announced such a course, which was called Hacking Anti-Fraud Systems. Hacking anti-fraud systems was supposed to be a huge course that allowed users to learn how to bypass anti-fraud systems. But unfortunately, due to certain difficulties, we did not manage to make a 100% high-quality project as it was conceived. Because there were often restrictions on censorship. Because, figuratively speaking, I can say the word dick on the air, and someone can't, for example. Someone considers it immoral and believes that, for example, it is necessary to avoid it and not mention it. here. But nevertheless, mention it. Do not mention it. It is still there. Therefore, not to talk about it means to lie to yourself. So, unfortunately, we didn't reach a certain kind of consensus on censorship and interaction with other lecturers, and we ended up with a product that the quality of which was pretty good at the beginning, but unfortunately, then the project was blown away. Well, we can say so. Yes, there is a lot of useful information there indeed, but I was not given, let's say, complete creative freedom. And we, in fact, take this ethical hacker, and you know what we will do with him? We will replace this ethical hacker with a very unethical info gypsy. So now I will play the role of just such an info gypsy. Let's talk a little bit of info gypsy. So what would I like to tell and present to you? What was not possible to achieve through my cooperation with another company, there is an opportunity to achieve through cooperation with myself. Namely, I made a small course on working with anti-fraud systems, and I will tell you about it now. This will be my personal debut as an info gypsy. Because if earlier I conducted free webinars or private lessons, now, unfortunately or fortunately, the price of my 1 hour of consultation is $1,000, and not all users have access to it. Well, you know, working for free is also not very profitable. It is not very profitable when there is a huge pile of projects, a huge pile of ideas, and you want to do something really interesting. So we changed this ethical hacker we worked with before to an unethical info gypsy who doesn't give a shit, and we get the next course. Only 10 lessons. The technologies that are described there and the methods were not mentioned in the webinars, nor were they mentioned anywhere in any lessons, or, well, they were not even mentioned at all. It is completely unique, something you can't even imagine. And you, moreover, work with it every day, every day. Everything is shown in practice. That is, we have theory, practice, theory, practice. Studied how it works, looked at how to change it, how it is, how to prevent it, or how to detect it and then prevent it. The course is taught by me personally. There are no other users, no other guest lecturers. Each lesson was recorded by me without the participation of neurons. Well, sorry, only in the process of translation into other languages neuronals participate. Well, and of course no censorship. This does not mean that we will learn the songs of Leningrad, but I mean that if we are talking about any moment that may violate the legislation of certain countries, then we will be obliged to talk about it, because we are considering this topic. If you turn a blind eye to crimes, they will not disappear, right? This means that we can take a good look at them and fully consider the mechanism of how they work. That's it, conditionally speaking, like this. And the price, immediately, the most important point for many users, I have not yet decided. We'll see how the users of this, it will work. But I think the price will be around $500 for all 10 lessons. Well, if we then get good feedback, then I still have topics that I can show, and for example, how to work with the Great Burp Suite there, or how, well, I know, I really show how to create your own router and so on. Here, but there are very, very many options, and I don't want to give them in public. I will explain why. Because when you leak a topic to the public, it stops working. Well, I've had it so many times before, and I've paid a lot for it. Therefore, in this case, a person will receive unique knowledge at the level of a top researcher. For an absolutely small fee. And again, in this case, only I will be responsible for this course. Well, I would say this. You know, the most important thing I would say about this course, if I If I saw it, no. Otherwise I would have bought it myself. That's how fucking he turned out, bitch. Just fucked up. Well, again, if you like the course, we will continue with the lessons and so on. Well, now our moment of infogypsyism, it is over, and we proceed to our main topic. Our main topic is Gmail. Gmail updates, all of which are and have occurred in anti-fraud systems and how we can work with them. The webinar will be divided into two parts, or rather, our topic today will be divided into two parts. The first part is the hardware part, the second part is the network part. At the same time, the part is hardware. I will now tell you and show you how you can see for yourself what information about your hardware Google collects. I don't mean the fucking graphics card or anything like that you can find on some checker sites. No, I'm referring to the full in-depth exploration of your PC that's happening right now, even when you're watching this webinar and don't know it. And the second part is networked. The updates that were associated with the release of the 140 version of Google Chrome are related to both hardware and networking. But it is worth noting so that there is no criticism of me in the comments, and we, if I'm not mistaken, already considered the hardware part with you about 3 years ago. At that time it looked a little different because there was a different set of information. But that's not the point. I just warned you. So if anyone says it's an accordion, don't say that. I warned about this in advance. Where does our story begin? Our story first begins with the installation of the Chrome browser. Once again, why Chrome? Why not Firefox? Why not Edge, for example? Chrome is a trendsetter. Why? Because the most popular browser, the same Opera, the same Edge, a lot of other browsers, are based on the Chromium platform, and it's a trendsetter. Therefore, we will focus on it. And of course, Google, cannot be compared with some small home research studio. So, as soon as you go to the google.com website and try to install the Chrome browser, the first thing you should pay attention to is this little check mark. This tick is purely formal. What does this mean? When you have it installed by default, that is, this checkbox is active by default, and as soon as you download the version of Google Chrome, it is downloaded for you. Of course, I have shown this many times, for each user, its own unique Chrome is downloaded. Plus, it is also downloaded from various CDN networks, so just in case, I will remind you what you should always know. Download Chrome only through a proxy. But this checkbox is responsible for Google's receipt of user information. By default, it is active and allows Google to get all the information, but it would seem that it is very easy to do and take it to deactivate this checkbox. However, in this case, let's put it this way, Google says, I kiss you gently on the lips, but the dick is near your ass. Approximately this is what happens. If you uncheck this box, then something can change only in the legal aspect. In all other respects, absolutely not a damn thing will change, but it will only be more difficult for you to find and see the information that Google collects about you, so in some cases you can find information on the internet that this tick needs to be unchecked. In some cases, what to put. In my subjective opinion, absolutely it, because you will be anyway. How? Please note that the quality here in the webinar is not very good, as far as I can see. Okay, I'll try to tell you this, in words. In this screenshot, we have the Google Chrome user data folder. It is located in the C drive in the application data folder. That is, each of you has it absolutely without exception. So, When we go to Application Data, Local, Google, Chrome, User Data, we can find a file called Local State on the left side of the screenshot, on the left side of the slide. And on the right side, if we go from the same User Data folder to the default folder, we can find the Preferences file. We are interested in these two files. Of course, you can look at all the others, there are a lot of them, and some identifying information can be found in other files, but it's not that fundamental, and I don't want to drag this webinar out forever. Therefore, just remember two files. One is a local state file, the other is a preferences file. Local state is a file of your PC. That is, it stores information about your PC. Preferences, as you can see, it is in the default folder, that is, in the users folder, the default user. Information about the user is stored there, and this information is stored in these two files in a semi-open mode. What does this mean? This means that you can read part of it with a notepad, while the other part you can read by deciphering it. I'll show you how. Let's move on. Our next slide. We open the local state file, which is responsible for retrieving information about our PC. This file contains everything that the Google Chrome browser was able to collect from our PC. How it could identify us and what information it will transmit to Google servers. Again, you can open this file with Notepad, and at the very beginning, you can find the date of installation of your browser. It was installed anew or it is an update. How many web resources were opened? What was the total duration of all sessions? That is, completely, everything you can imagine about when you installed the browser will be known to Google. Accordingly, if your browser doesn't have any sessions, it's completely zero, has just been installed, and in 1 minute you're on to Gmail registration. Well, you may have problems, but not always. You don't need to pay so much attention to it. What you need to pay attention to the Save System Profile item highlighted at the top. The saved system profile is a set of user identifying information. We have deciphered it many times, so we will do it again and see what is stored in this text, which is highlighted in blue in front of you. This encoding is basis text encoding 64. And can you call it that? Would it be correct to call it or not? Protobuf format. What is stored there? Pay attention to the next slide and immediately look at the links that are at the top. I recommend remembering them just in case, or taking a screenshot of your mobile phone for those who want to see what specific information about it is stored, and Google Chrome. The first link is the decoder. That is, something that will allow you to decrypt this block of protobuf information. And the second Chrome source file is this one. You can find it in the official Chromium browser repository. This is the specification. It is possible to combine the specification with the decrypted information, but to be honest, I did not bother, because I was not particularly interested in it. But if one of you does, that person has great respect. Let's now take a quick look at what specific information our Google Chrome browser knows about us. All information is presented by 36 to more than 50 different items. Each of these items is a set of certain and a set of specific values. In this case, here, for example, is the simplest point. This is information about our video card. Drivers, manufacturer, model. Well, that is all the same that we can get in principle with the help of an ordinary person. Regular browser leaks, right? But here's point number 2 up here. Point number 2 has the meaning of 873. it would seem, well, the dog is with him, 873. 873 is the amount of RAM. 873, I wonder which of the users will understand whether this amount of memory is anomalous or not. Or maybe this amount of memory, let's say, corresponds to virtual machines. Can this happen in theory? Could be. Well, let's take a look further. Information about our processor, the number of cores, information about our amount of RAM, about the size of our hard drive. In particular, point number 6 of this screenshot. But maybe there is something else interesting. Information about our motherboard, its model. The information in point number 4 is information from OCPI tables, that is, what manages the power supply of our computer. If we pay attention, for example, to the specification, it would be possible to show it in the logo file itself, but you would just see the number 1, 2, 3, right? But if we refer to the system profile protofile, we can see that the Google Chrome operative browser also stores information about the presence of, for example, an antivirus and the status of this antivirus in the user's profile. Looking ahead, I can say many more interesting points. Each of you can just look at this file and see for yourself what Google collects about you, what information it collects. But I will say this, types of your network cards, types of their connections. That is, hello VPN, hello to everyone else. Who else? Installed additional software in the form of a firewall, in the form of an antivirus, installed extensions, installed remote administration system, installed systems, again, the same RDP, yes, remote administration, what I said, but in fact, everything that is necessary, everything is collected in one single profile. And in particular, when a long time ago I discovered this interesting feature, it was not used. It was not directly exploited then as it is used now. We will come to this later. I will explain why I suddenly remembered this and pulled it out of the annals of history. The fact is that when I noticed it, there was a very cool moment, which you never know. Well, you probably don't know. I'll show it to you now. Please pay attention here. Botanical crap and few people can understand, but your computers have an encryption module. It is called TPM. And this module is responsible for how much your computer will be, let's say, trusted, that it is secure. And such security checks are checked, for example, by Windows 11. That is, who remembers when we had Windows 11, we could not even install it normally, because many users did not have this TPM encryption module on their computers. So here's what's interesting. You can always log in, right-click on the Windows icon, go in and view Windows Security and see the specification for this TPM, the Trust Platform module. In this case, it is on your screen. But here's what's interesting. You will not see this parameter, which you can see here at number 4. SOTPM. SOTPM, software TPM, which is a sign of a virtual machine 100%. And just thanks to the change in this parameter in 2021, it was... No, I'm lying. Probably it was? Hell, I don't remember what year it was, but when I took off right on a geo bypass because no one could do it, and actually I did. And it is precisely the presence and reading of this parameter, which is not visible by standard or non-standard means, reading it from the TPM module specification, that is a clear sign of using a virtual machine. And in the context of Google Chrome, using a browser in a virtual machine is not that illegal or anything untrusted, to put it simply. here. So it would seem that this is such a small detail, which virtually no one knows about. But nevertheless, this detail is key as in online exam services now. That is, without it, online exams will not work. The same is true in such software products as, for example, GeoComply or Google Chrome. But nevertheless, we return to our main topic. Why does Google need so much information? From my experience, I can tell you. They have been collecting this information for a very long time. If I'm not mistaken, I first came across this information back in the year, probably in 2018 or 19. Around those years. And then, in principle, everything was cool, and they, as they said, did not use this information much. In fact, I noticed a huge difference when we replaced a few parameters of our PC that were read by the browser and replaced them from virtual to real. At that time, there was no TPM. There were similar parameters that no longer work, but nevertheless, the effect was huge. Huge, I mean what? This is exactly the registration of Gmail without SMS. Will come soon. I'll explain why this is one of the most important patterns to work with. But now let's return to our topic. Why now, all of a sudden, after so many years, did I remember about this forgotten technology, perhaps even known to everyone? The fact is that starting with version 140, Google Chrome has an integrated AI assistant, Gemini. The integrated Gemini AI assistant collects information about the user's computer on absolutely legal grounds in order to ensure maximum speed and trust and non-abuse of its resources. In other words, in simple terms, Google has given carte blanche to its product to fully identify the user. And then the following situation happens. And then all your information, which is highlighted here in the form of blue highlighted text, it is packed into a very simple hash, which we have highlighted with a red border at the bottom. It's called the Saved System Profile hash, and it's your unique fingerprint and your unique, let's say, your unique link to a personal file within the Google ecosystem, which, based on the data received from the Saved System Profile, makes a decision, of course, in full automaty, decides whether this client is trusted or not, and assigns it a specification. Not a specification, but how else to put it? Well, we can say, let's put it this way. A word flew out of my head, figuratively speaking, rating. Is the customer real? Is this customer a bot? Is this client but any means of bypassing protections, that is, anti-detection and so on? And then, when you visit Google's web resources, they don't give a shit about your canvases, WebGL, and other crap. She already knows everything about you from behind. That is, we try to change our face, but they look at us from a completely different side. This is the first part. According to the information I have just told you, you can do your own research. But I would still like to tell you a little about how all this can be avoided. I can't say 100% that I'm familiar with the architecture of browser anti-detects. However, it is quite possible to replace this information through the use of browser anti-detect. In other words, if the developer hasn't completely cut it, or rather hasn't cut it in any way, I don't know how to do it, not cut it from a project that doesn't have it, from Chromium, a Google service, then, in principle, there is an opportunity to replace everything that is collected here in the Saved System Profile. In other words, you can hide the VPN connection, you can replace information about the hardware, you can replace information about whether it is used in a virtual machine. That is absolutely everything. But here, the questions are for the developers. Will they do it? Will they bother? And do they know about such a simple technology? In turn, for my part, I want to say something. Now, in the new update, 5.15.1 has produced several fixes, really important fixes that have been noticed thanks to accurate research. But there are a few more points, of course, that we would like to stop, namely, to stop the entire network environment, because now this is almost the most important parameter. I don't care about that processor, I don't care about that video card, but the network environment is now the cornerstone of successful work. So, for those who work with browser anti-detects, I recommend checking with your developers whether they are replacing this information. Perhaps someone will even call it nonsense and not say that it is better to go and change the canvas. But here to each his own. For my part, I have done my best to change this information in the new version of the anti-detect, and I will also do my best to monitor this mechanism in the future. Because, to be honest, I was almost completely sure that this mechanism was dead. It turns out that after all these years, Google activated it as some kind of fucking sleeper agent. Well, let's move on to our next part. Our next part is the network part. Why is it so important to us? Let's look at a few very important parameters. Look, we have, for example, such a system called DPI, Deep Packet Inspection. Many users are afraid of it like fire and think that if a web resource uses DPI, then that's it, they can easily figure out your VPN. Not really. A web resource cannot use DPI, because in order to use DPI, you need to be an intermediate node and fully check all traffic. Accordingly, if a web resource cannot use DPI, how can they know that we are using a VPN or proxy? Have you asked yourself this question? And I recommend asking it. And now we will take a short technical break for literally 3 or 4 minutes. I recommend that you make tea, open a can of beer, or go for a smoke. And we're going to come back to our network part, which is incredibly important for you to understand, so that you understand what you're working with. Those who understand everything that I am telling you now will not have any problems at all. So let's move on to our, again, network part. So, we have found out that web resources cannot use DPI because only, let's say, standardized traffic passes through them. And accordingly, they cannot use such mechanisms in any way. That is, they can only use the TCP protocol, the UDP protocol, the QIC protocol, the WebRTC protocol. Well, in fact, everyone. That is, they can use, well, TLS I haven't mentioned yet. They can only use standardized protocols, the specification of which is publicly available. And accordingly, it is very difficult to come up with something new and interesting. On my own behalf, I can say this. There are many different VPN detection systems, for example. Okay, cool, they exist. Yes, super. But these systems are set up first and, let's say, can stand up to standard VPNs. That is, figuratively speaking, he downloaded, jumped, did not download, but went according to my instructions from GitHub, created a servac for himself. Wow, it can be seen that it's a VPN. How can it be seen? It can be seen by analyzing packet headers. What needs to be done to prevent this bullshit? You just need to change these headings on the client himself. And that's it. Since a VPN is simply a tunnel, it will transfer information directly from the client to a web resource without modifying it. Cool, super. But in fact, information is absolutely useless for us at the moment, right? Therefore, I want to summarize a little for now. Before we even begin our first step, I want to summarize. There are a lot of options for defining VPN and proxy. But basically, I will say this, 95% of all these options are aimed at standard solutions. a step to the right, a step to the left, or, God forbid, a change in the technology itself, and that's it, the whole system collapses completely. That is, no resource will ever know that you are using a VPN if you have a little brain and modify it a little. Well, of course, you will need to modify the network adapter itself. But I am saying that this is possible and is not a particular problem. And Google, of course, knows that. As I've said many times before, boat traffic is growing and growing every day and is a problem for all major web properties. Not just for Google, but also for Facebook, Amazon, and so on. And something needs to be done about it. If you can't come up with something, let's say, in the current realities, you need to create them. And that's why several, or rather 3 fucking horsemen of the apocalypse come on the scene who came to us with a fucking update of the 140 Chrome. And they had existed in Chrome for God knows how long, but they had only begun to work now. First, we see here the so-called grace or gris. It depends on where you were taught grammar. Gris is, you can say it, let's put it this way. This mechanism is used as a set of ciphers, allegedly. That is, as you can see here in the screenshot from Wireshark, for example, it is used in the cipher suite. That is, it allows web resources to understand which cipher suites we support. Here, I will spend a little time on a very important point, and especially for people who believe that the TLS fingerprint needs to be changed. What is a TLS fingerprint in general? You know you've got this kind of crap to work with. This crap is called computer. There's another crap in this crap called computer that makes this computer work. It is called a processor. There are various crap in this processor that make it work in one way or another. They are called instructions. And so, there is an instruction called AES. Any of you can install the CPU-Z software or its equivalent and find all the instructions that your processor supports there. But what we're interested in is the CPU instruction, the AES instruction. Because thanks to the presence of AES instructions in your processor, you can maintain a secure connection to web resources. Because you need an AES instruction to use TLS. The bottom line, what do we have? If we take standard virtual machines, you don't have AES in the processor stack. You can take the old versions of anti-detect, you can take the standard versions of VirtualBox and VMware, and you will see that there is no AES instruction there, and accordingly, the set of TLS fingerprint ciphers will be different. But if we take modern PCs and compare them with each other, then the TLS fingerprint will always be the same. Because it actually consists of a dozen values, namely cipher suites that your computer supports. And the main purpose of this TLS fingerprint is to identify the use of malicious software, effectively disembodied bots, demons, and everything else. But the bottom line is that it makes no sense to use it in this case. But why do I take so long to tell you why I singled out this grace? Grace or gris is incredibly important because it's absolutely random. This is garbage, but not garbage in terms of garbage with shoulder straps, but in terms of the fact that this is a useless set of information, absolutely useless. And the trick here is that the web resource initiates the creation of a gris and waits for a response with the same gris. But in many cases, proxies can block this gris because they don't understand it. And accordingly, the web resource was initiated but did not receive it back. And what does it mean? A proxy is used, or VPN is used in rare cases. Why rare? Because the VPN will let your traffic through, in this case, without modification. But the proxy is a spittle to figure it out in this way. This is especially true for HTTP, HTTPS, SOC S4 proxies, technologies from the Stone Age. But nevertheless, we must mention them. Google has now activated this system. It has been present for God knows how long. I can't even remember when it appeared, a long time ago. But now, as far as the documentation can be trusted, it is fully active. Not a bad system, absolutely simple. That is, you send some garbage, you send some nonsense, you wait for someone to answer you nonsense. Nonsense, they didn't answer you. It means that someone filtered the traffic. But, by the way, in some cases there can also be AAA false positive triggering on the part of the firewall. Though the networkers wouldn't agree with me, I'll still believe them. I won't believe them. So let's move on. The next system that has appeared, information about it, is on the link at the top of this slide. Whoever wants to can see what kind of snitch system it is. The snitch system is a new player in the market. Why? Because it's extremely effective against fighting OpenVPN or WireGuard, basically any VPN connection. Why do I talk to almost anyone? Because if we don't use VPN encryption technology, then we'll be fine. But this seems to be the ravings of a madman. But I will talk about this a little later. So what is snitch? It was presented quite recently, in June of this year. And this is the so-called delay analysis system and PTT round trip time. That is question answer, question answer. What's the big idea? When using a VPN, the traversal time between the packet, between the client and the server, is noticeably increased. That is, we understand that we have some additional intermediate node added, and accordingly, the time of communication increases. Some proxy detection techniques are based on this, where the server checks the real round of trip time to the client and compares it to the reference time for the client's supposed location. That is, this technology, as I have already shown in my webinars, is, relatively speaking, a ping of communication with the IP address that you have, for example, in the United States, and with you where you are, for example, in some Zapordievka. Here's how it works. But the Snitch project proposed an approach to comparing the TCP handshake round-trip time with the estimated minimum round-trip time. That is, I have just said a lot of different obscenities. I will try to tell you all this now, how it happens in real life. Snitch's research has shown that direct connections, i.e. client-server connections, have a negligible redundancy of round-trip time. That is, in other words, how much the package can be lost. Just from the reference value, it can be lost within 5%, while using with a VPN allows you to get a delay of 100, 110, 120, 150%. That is, in other words, 20-30 times more. And that's something we've talked about many times before. That is, how to determine the use of VPNs thanks to pings, thanks to everything else, and so on. But the most interesting feature of this project lies in one more know-how. I have already talked many times about a protocol called Web Transport. It replaced WebSocket. So, using the snitch system with Web Transport allows you to determine the use of VPN with incredible accuracy, namely with an accuracy of as much as 96% with a small margin of error. What is the essence of all this? When a VPN is used, packet travel times increase. This, relatively speaking, is the result. It is incremented by TCP analysis, increased by UDP analysis, web transport, and so on. There are many such technologies. Their essence lies in the same thing. That is, in other words, what worked before. Back there, 10 years ago, in order to define a VPN, now the same shit works, in general, in a different package. But nevertheless, this shit works, because probably few people even know that you have such a protocol as web transport. It is generally present. How to deal with this? Now we will consider. Next, what else do we have? We have ours. It was the second horseman of the apocalypse. We also have the third horseman of the apocalypse. It's a damn anti-quantum computer protocol. A protocol that you can see now on your screens. This protocol has been present in the Chrome browser since version 124. What is this most interesting protocol? Well, by the way, it was only fully activated, only in the 140 version. And just in case, for the future, I want to say that for all those users who want to develop in anti-fraud, for those who understand that this is a big buck and want to become a professional in this business, I have always said at my webinars, look at the Chrome update, look at the Chrome update. Is there a new version? Well, drive her into ChatGPT, see what has changed, what items have been added, which have been removed. Well, it's incredibly simple, and yet, well, see, it's incredibly important. Because, for example, the same protocol that you see now, if you looked at a couple of versions of Chrome back, it would have been disabled, for example, conditionally. I can't say now that he was there 3 versions ago, but conditionally he was there 10 versions ago. Here, accordingly, you saw that your Chrome has been updated to the 140th version. Your situation has not changed except, for example, this protocol, and everything has stopped working for you. So what needs to be done? Just turn it off, bitch. This is such a simple thing. Sometimes it works. But that's not what we're talking about now. Back to our wonderful post-quantum protocol. This protocol, post-quantum, is designed so that when we have quantum computers, when we all have them, we will not be able to decrypt the current traffic dumps. That is, if some villain is sitting now and analyzing, or rather not analyzing but simply collecting traffic, your wallets, for example, well, in fact, yes, he has such an opportunity. Imagine that, for example, I am now a villain. I'm sitting in Dubai right now and collecting a huge traffic log, and there are wallets, bank data, and so on. And when I finally buy myself, now I will issue a loan for a quantum computer, then I will be able to decipher it all. And yes, indeed, it will be possible. But in order to avoid this, they came up with such a protocol, X25519 Cyber 768. This protocol is already working. But what is remarkable about it directly for us? For us, it is notable for the fact that they do not know how to work with it. That is, Google Chrome can work with it? Can Edge work with it? Your Proxifier does not know how to work with it. And then the system breaks down. And then the system fails. Because according to all the data that Google receives from your browser, this protocol, judging by the version of your browser, works with it and supports it. Everything is cool, but nevertheless, it is impossible to establish a connection using this protocol with you. And what does it mean? This means that someone is filtering it. And who will filter the TLS protocol? The TLS protocol can only be filtered by someone who does not know how to work with it. Here's a simple option. A simple version of how this protocol can be a huge pain in the ass. And why, for example, from the same ordinary home, beautiful home PC, you can go in and register a lot of Gmail accounts. Not many, I lie, 5 or 4. However, you may not be able to do this when using proxy, because Google is trying to establish a connection using this protocol, but the connection cannot be established. At best, it will come beaten. That's the kind of bullshit. What to do with all that I have just said? Because we need a solution. We need not only to talk about what bastards everyone is. First, If you are planning to use this one of our first ones, or rather let's do it differently. How to resist the first grass. Forget that there is something like HTTP, HTTPS, or SOAK ES4 proxies. Well, perhaps there are, of course, exceptions. I can't say if there is any old believer who has decided, for example, to update Dante in order to use SOX 4. Okay, maybe there is such a thing, but I don't know such projects. They are unknown to me. I want to say that using Grace with SOX 5 projects is not a particular problem, but with SOX 4 it will be SOX 4, HTTP, HTTPS, it will be a huge problem. Therefore, I recommend forgetting about this type of proxy. Just like I recommend forgetting about ProxyPod, not about proxies, but about VPN with the wonderful name Himachi. Perhaps not all of you are familiar with it, but it is quite a popular protocol, especially for establishing communication with routers. Therefore, our first horseman of the apocalypse turns out to be not an apocalypse horseman, but a horseman of diarrhea. And you can simply do anything with it. You use a high-quality VPN, you use high-quality proxies, you don't give a shit about this Grace. But with the second guy, the situation is much different. What is happening here? Delay. That is, you actually need to deceive physics. Let's take a look at how it all works. First, we'll look at why users use, for example, OpenVPN or WireGuard, and why not everyone wants to use, for example, SOX 5. The reason is very simple. The fact is that the same OpenVPN, it allows you to fully encapsulate yourself, all the traffic of your computer. And it's cool good, really. That is, when you set up just SOX, you also need to be wise with DNS, smart with IPv6, with WebRTC, and so on. Well, when you install the OpenVPN, there are no problems. All IPs were replaced at once. This is very convenient. How fucking convenient, but not a damn thing will work normally. I will explain why. The fact is that the traffic delay in this case is, say, 99%. It is not related to where you are, but to the greed of the person who provides you with a proxy. The fact is that VPN is a security tool. Accordingly, the traffic is encrypted. In order to convey it, let's imagine the situation. There are two people communicate using an Enigma machine, for example. One needs time to type text on Enigma. Then he sends this text, for example, to some intermediary decipher. He must decipher all this with the help of Enigma, and then transmit it to the addressee. Well, you understand how hemorrhaging this is. Exactly the same thing happens when using a VPN. And accordingly, if instead of this decipherer, instead of, for example, some young cool, there, smart guy, put some old guy in jail whom he does not see, then he is frozen because he just fell asleep. Well, accordingly, you will have a corresponding delay in receiving the message. Therefore, the faster the VPN server, the faster your traffic. And here you can achieve an incredible increase in speed. But unfortunately, not all, or rather almost none of the proxy providers do this. They don't claim, they can tell you about some speed, for example, right? Here they can show, we have a speed there, 100 megabits. Well, where is your ping? Where are your latency and the rest of your mothers? For some reason, no one reports about this. And why? Because the maintenance of such a VPN server mainly happens on shared cores. That is, when a single processor core is distributed among multiple clients. And even 2 cores are not enough for a VPN to work properly. I would say that in order to ensure a good, really cool VPN speed, that is to the maximum of its capabilities, 4 dedicated cores are the gold standard that should be. Well, 4 cores allocated to you only will not be economically profitable. Therefore, I would recommend asking proxy services questions. But there is either another option, which I will tell you about now. Replace your proxy with an X-ray proxy or Hysteria 2. Perhaps this will not be something new for you, yes, because you have probably already heard about it, but still, just in case, I will write to the chat. I consider Hysteria 2 to be the most promising project on, let's say, almost as promising as the Mask project. Well, not to be confused with that ketamine fucker and mask in the sense of mask here. And using these types of proxies allows you to avoid all those cons of SOX 5 and get all the benefits of using a VPN. That is, the traffic will be encapsulated in the same way, but. There will be no problems with decrypting traffic. In fact, I would say that X-ray can give somewhere around 90% of the real speed, Hysteria in the region of 93 to 94% of the real speed, while OpenVPN standard, do you know how much it will give? Well, 60 at best. That's if you're lucky. Here. So, in order to fight the snitch scheme, I would recommend using either intermediate resources in the country in which you work, that is, accordingly, well, for example, the same grandfather. Yes, oddly enough, it will still work. It will always work. In other words, you take a Destiny server. Do you work in the USA? Okay, take a dedicated server there. Install your anti-detect on him, and this snitch, well, inject him with one causal place on the lips. Well, if you're sitting somewhere and you still have dial-up internet, well, then maybe you should consider moving somewhere else. But there is another option that I tested personally. And either I'm so lucky, because I don't know 100% whether it's still a technology, I'm still studying it, or it's really how it works. Back to ketamine. Starlink. Oddly enough, this snitch project, does not work against Starlink. And in fact, it turns out that you, being even the devil knows where, for example, we choose the United States as our target all the time, right? Here, you can be in Thailand, relatively speaking, in Vietnam, and you will have almost the same connection speed as the connection speed if you were in the United States. Just thanks to the use of the same Starlink. Unbelievable, but true. And unfortunately, I can't say that this is a panacea for everything, but at the same time, well, I will explain why. Because I haven't tested it outside of the Emirate. I mean, I'm testing here, I'm by what kind of ping I have, and there are no problems at all. Here. Well, accordingly, it may be different in your country. I can't say 100%, so if you may have any acquaintances with Starlinks, I would recommend that you use this equipment at least in terms of testing. By the way, I will say a small moment. Next year, in February-March, we plan to start working on building a proxy system based on Starlinks. But it is so. Again, this is the plan for now. So there is no need to say later that I promised something. So, the second horseman of the apocalypse who will fuck yours, if you are using your home computer and there is nothing you can do about it except to use either OpenVPN alternatives, such as X-ray or Hysteria. An even better option is to use a grandfather with the software you need in the country in which you are going to work. Or use Starlink, because in this case, the Snitch project combines all those small mechanisms that we know, such as ping, jitter, for example, or a ping-pong game between the client and the server using the WebRTC protocol, or using the Web Transport Protocol, UDP, and so on. Well, we return to our third horseman of the apocalypse, our post-quantum encryption protocol. What to do with it? How can we work with it? In fact, it is not particularly difficult. The only problem is whether your proxy supports this protocol and whether it will modify it. What I have done and what you can do. I realize for myself that the solutions that are on the market are created for completely different purposes. Therefore, I am currently working on the implementation of my own WinTune network adapter. You're all an open source project. That is, each of you can assemble this project. This is not a big problem. But it was in this project that I had the opportunity to fully work with this protocol. That is, we don't just need to, let's say, let it pass, we also needed to eat our IP address and make it work properly. This is already a situation, a rather complex problem. Therefore, if you are using some old proxy maker that has not been updated for a long time, I recommend that you immediately forget about it. Just like if you use any server means, let's say, traffic transfers, because there may be restrictions on the server as well. We encounter this all the time. When hosters block certain protocols in order to ensure, allegedly, in quotes, the security of their network resources, in fact, just these few moments are enough for you to have no problems with Gmail registration and so on. I don't want to say that we are faced with something unusual and so on. We are constantly here. In this topic, I have been in anti-fraud for 10 years in particular. And we constantly have some epics. That is, some incomprehensible update, some incomprehensible technology. He appears. Everyone is in a panic. Everything is gone. Everything is gone. Here. Well, in fact, the solution is found quite quickly. And then this technology is so useless that, well, now surprise some of you with WebRTC. Correct? You won't surprise anyone. And yet, in 2013, it was just wow. It was something incredible. And people, plus probably until 2020, that is count 7 years, they did not yet understand what they were dealing with. That's exactly the same with these technologies. Users will not understand what is going on, why their wonderful proxy, which they checked on all checkers, why with this proxy, for example, you cannot register a Gmail account. Because he shows you that, you are using means of falsification. Well, but no, how is that? I forgot. Well, I recommend everyone to download the new version of Anti-Detect. And one more thing, if you suddenly do not want to work with this cyber protocol yet, I would advise you, although it is contrary to logic, you can go to the Google Chrome properties and disable this protocol. Why I repeat contrary to logic? Because in all new browsers, it is enabled by default and accordingly, it will be an anomaly equivalent to using a proxy. But at the very least, your browser will immediately inform you that the protocol is disabled, and then the server will have no questions for you. Protocol disabled? Okay, let's throw on a couple of photoglasses. But if the protocol is disabled, if the protocol is enabled but does not arrive, then, of course, proxy and some automation tool are used. That's all for today. Now let's move on to the answers to the questions. Let's literally devote it, we are a little behind schedule, by as much as 20 minutes. So let's come back, and now we will answer your questions. So the user is Oleg. The first question is from Oleg. I apologize, friends. I will ignore some messages that are there. Hello, hello, hello. I greeted you all, but sorry, it will take quite a long time to respond to all greetings. So user Oleg asks, will there be new lessons for the course Hacking Anti-Fraud, Anti-Detect Systems? They promised to record it. I promised to write it down in what way? I said that perhaps there will be new lessons. Here, and I reported at the webinar that there are plans to record such and such lessons, but unfortunately, we did not reach a consensus. This is what I talked about today at the beginning of our lesson, and therefore, alas, I can only be responsible for the course where I am the author and sole creator. Farther. Alex Simbal, how do you feel about Proton Mail? In 2017, I met one of Proton Mail's top executives, Alex Brennan. By the way, he and I drank quite a lot of beer. It was in Kharkiv at the Hackett exhibition. And I talked to him specifically about privacy. Well, what did he say? We'll certainly give out all the information if there's going to be a violation of the law, is equivalent to a violation of the law in Switzerland. That is, if you violate a law that does not exist in Switzerland, then you will not be extradited. If you violate the law that exists in Switzerland, then, accordingly, information about you is released. Therefore, we return to what? If you... a good citizen, you use Proton Mail. For example, I use Proton Mail for several of my resources. Well, if you have information that is better to keep secret, then of course only your mail server. That's the only way, and there are no other options. And in addition, there was such an interesting story with Proton Mail also in the year about 2017, 2018. They reported that they do not store information about mail encryption keys. Here, and in fact this is not the case. They store it and how. So, well, Proton Mail is different from Gmail. Well, you know what? Proton and their G. Well, these are different words. The essence is the same. Will there be support for the AA user? Will there be support for macOS with the substitution of its fingerprints? We want to do this? Here I want to explain a few nuances. Look, macOS has T1, T2 processors and M1 processors, M2 and, in my opinion, already M3. T1, T2 processors are based on AMD technology. The processor technology on M1, M2, M3, they are based on ARM technology. Different virtualization, that is, we did anti-detect for macOS many times, or rather anti-detect, which supported macOS systems for T1 and T2 processors, but there was no such opportunity to virtualize, respectively, new operating systems. Therefore, now Oracle, represented by its product VirtualBox, they have made virtualization of ARM processors. But it feels like it was made to either a person with bipolar personality disorder or two completely different people. Because one part is done perfectly cool, the second part is just not very good, let's put it mildly. Therefore, we are now waiting for fixes from Oracle in the first place. Their 7th generation of VirtualBox made me suffer. Believe me, I really suffered when I was analyzing their source code. I have never encountered such a number of errors that were there in all the time I worked with VirtualBox. That is, the code is simply crooked. So as soon as there are fixes from Oracle, we will immediately announce it because we are interested in it. The next question, a question from user Leonid. Vector, how secure is Tor technology in your VPN Tor VPN bundle? Leonid is very safe as much as it has the weakest link. because Thor has gone through a huge number of audits and you will have to make a VPN yourself. So I would say this. If we are talking about security, then it is safe. If we are talking about anonymity, then this is another point. Well, again, I repeat, from what did you pay? Where did you register? To what mail? There are a lot of options here. In fact, I will say that you will not find a better free guide than my free guide on the detect.expert website. Next is the next question. Question from an AD user. Hi, thank you for your activities. Hello AD, thank you for your comment. What preset to use in Antique for Yandex? What anti-fraud does Yandex use? Yandex uses its own anti-fraud, which is based on data from IP data, IP quality score, and if I'm not mistaken, the last time they used Xeon was as well. But they don't have a self-written system as far as I know. Or maybe there's some kind of aggregator that simply collects information from various sources and then applies certain logical equations to them. But to be honest, very few people try to work with Yandex because, well, why? Why collect bottles when you can collect diamonds? Well, you will agree. As for the presets, to be honest, I can't even say whether we have a preset for Yandex or not. It used to be, so it's better to check with the support? Well, it's a rare question, so I can't answer it, let's say, relevant. The next question is a question from Korochka. Is the camera replaced with photos and videos? No, Korochka, so far it is replaced only in a photo. I said that I would add the video in a week, in 10 days. I didn't have time for this webinar. Next is a question from user Jess. Dmitry, hello. Last month, macOS Tahoe was released, and starting with this version of the OS, web GPU support is enabled in Safari by default. I have thoughts on this. Do you think I should stay on the previous version of macOS for now if I work with 3Matrix and other systems of a similar level? As for macOS Tahoe and their web GPU support, what I want to say. Don't be afraid of her. The thing is, what is there to be afraid of in terms of web GPU? Let's do this. There is information about your graphics card that can be obtained using web GPU. This is just a set of parameters of your graphics card. I don't care about them. Well, absolutely. They will be the same for all users. Especially in the standardization of macOS, this is not a problem at all. If you do not use any spoofing systems, then you have nothing to fear. And if you do, then you need to be afraid of something else. Not web GPU, but web GPU benchmark systems. Then, a small performance test of your graphics card will be done in order to calculate if it is the video card you claim. But since I don't know of any anti-detections on macOS that emulate macOS, you are most likely working on a regular PC. So work and don't worry about anything. User Denis Menjivar reports that the hacker looks quite ethical. Yes, I think in principle it looks quite ethical. I liked it too. The next question is a question from the user Leonid. Vector, when will you be in Kharkiv? I will most likely never be in Kharkiv since I am no longer a citizen of Ukraine. And I don't plan to go back there. So, alas, you'd better come to us. Question from user Jezilin. Will there be a discount on the course for those who bought in 2023? I honestly didn't think about it, Yeziling. I will explain why. Because I absolutely did not manage the finances of the 23rd year. That is, I was invited there as a teacher. That's all. This is not my course. Well, let's put it this way. So, do you know such a meaning as wedding general? That's about how I played such a role somewhere. That is, I was invited as a teacher, some topics were agreed with me, I read lessons on these topics. Everything else, alas, does not concern me. The next question is a question from the user Sergey. Vector, hello! Hello, Sergey. Is it possible to make 1500 or fewer hops on LTE MTU proxies? This is very important when working with anti-fraud systems. If you want to make fewer hops, you can move closer to the source of this proxy. Well, as for the MTU of 1500, what's the problem? If you are talking about my proxies, then we, in my opinion, put it up without any problems. Contact the support. In my opinion, this is not a question at all. I don't see any problem. Well, hops only to move. Well, we will not deceive physics. The next question is a question from an AED user. Is the new course suitable for working with Yandex? And I can't say. I don't know. Again, this is how I answered you earlier. Yandex, well, no one orders. Accordingly, well, food I know perfectly. For example, Amazon now. Ask me something for Amazon, for Chase, for example, a bank. Not a question at all. With my eyes closed, I will answer at any time of the day or night. Regarding Yandex, well, alas, I can't say. I will say that, as I said earlier, why collect bottles when you can collect diamonds? Well, that's my opinion. So, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you in any way. Next is a question from user Ezelin. I use SOCKS, UDP, detect.expert, Quanon router. When searching on Google, there is a constant CAPTCHA. This was not the case before. How to fix? Determining the proxy usage in this case is yours. Therefore, I recommend contacting the Quanon user to test it for himself. And you, in turn, would recommend using just an alternative as a test. You can use the same Tron proxifier, for example, that comes with anti-detect. And by the way, just in case you're not a personal user, I'd like to say that an update for Patreon has been announced for the 25th of October, but it won't be released on the 25th of October. We will make it much faster. I mean, I'm planning to release Patreon sometime from Saturday. Well, in a week or so. Saturday next week. In the meantime, you can try just, well, an alternative proxy. So a question from user Larry. Vector, hello. Hi Larry. Will there be a region lock at the WTC? No locks, nothing will happen. This is a guarantee. Next is the next question. A question from the user Ant. Can I modify a local state file? Does anyone other than Google access this data from local state? And you can do it. No problem. You can establish that your browser was installed a long time ago, that it had incredible activity and so on. You did absolutely the right thing. That's absolutely 100%. The question is, just to the point where it needs to be, yes, you can do anything. And in fact, thanks to the modification of just one file, you can wind up such a trust, Kugla's eyes, well, it will be just great. But the only thing is that make sure that this trust works well, do the following trick. Now, it's the 141st browser. Put the 140th browser. Do some surfing through it so that you have this local state file formed normally. Then delete. No, you don't even have to delete the browser. Leave it, modify the file, and then roll in a new 141. Then the 141st, at the time of handshaking with Google servers, it will snatch all your data from the previous file and will think that you are really a real person. Therefore, this will be a cool option. Good job. Farther, in the new, a question from user Oleg. Will the new course have something on the topic of macOS hardened? Or is this topic with MacBooks dead? In the old course, this module was deleted. Oleg, to be honest, if we are talking about hardened, that is, about anonymity, there will be none. I will explain why. Anonymity in MacBooks died with M1 processors. Well, in fact, that is, now even I will say this, I spent a lot of time, many years, making very good money on the fact that I modified MacBooks specifically for anonymity, but I had to abandon with the release of new processors. Alas, and if you're thinking about maybe you asked macOS Hardened a question about anti-detect rather than anonymity, then in this case I can say that, oddly enough, it will. Namely, in terms of anonymity. I'll explain to you what. Maybe not in the first edition of these 10 lessons, but the lessons are written down. That is, there is no need to wait for anything. Everything is already fully recorded, and please, you can open access to people at any time. But I'll tell you one interesting trick. Maybe someone will also be interested. I've had it for a long time, somewhere, I don't remember how long. Damn, I'm not gonna lie. Well, in short, for a very fucking long time, I have had a half-dead EFE macOS project gathering dust on my shelf. I'll tell you what the fuck is. By the way, it would be possible to build a business with her if I found some person who would want to pour money into it and manage it all, because I don't have enough for everything, to be honest. Gist, tell. The macOS EFI project consists of a small custom bootloader that you install on your MacBook, and then when you turn on the Mac, you have the option to continue with your current identity or replace all your options. Yes, the mouse does not work there, but you can move from the keyboard. I made such a menu, you can move around and all the parameters of your hardware, that is, you can change all the identifiers. A striking example of speed, not speed, but performance, is that all Apple services crash at once. That is, you have a completely new Mac. Here, and it would be cool to do this trick, for example, to put about 50 MacBooks, for example, Airs, ProChecks, or, for example, the same Mac Pro iMac servers, and file this project there and make a remote control system and rent them out. This would have turned out to be a cool antique, really cool. That is, the user enters the site, the system automatically. He chooses what device he needs, the system accesses this device. Has all the data changed? You are welcome. That is, this is how my proxies change, for example. You can change every minute. So you, for example, during a month of rent, can create as many personalities as you want in this MacBook. This is an interesting project. I will show it as one of the options. I had such an option, I had such plans, but definitely not in the first year, because, again, the first year has already been recorded. It would be great, of course, to implement such a project, but to be honest, I am not enough for everything. There are very few people who understand so botanically what a goldmine it is. I'm still more busy with Antique now. Here are the cards. An Anticom for Android. And here's the next question from user Larry just about Android. When will Android Anti-Detect be available? Until the end of this year? Around the end of November? Work is underway, and well, in recent weeks, there has been absolutely no work because I do not have time. And so, about 80% everything is ready. Farther, R41 says that I have troubles with the connection, with the sound of the problem. Whoa! Another person, Leonid, said that there were problems with the sound, but it was so long ago that I don't even know. Apparently the problems have already passed. So, another user, again R41 writes, but no one else wrote. No one else wrote, well, I hope that everything is okay. Be sure to use Chrome. And if you use the Fox or Opera, the Fox completely copies everything that can only be done from Chrome. Why? Because they don't want to be outsiders. And the Opera, it is based on Chrome. One fuck. This is user Oleg. Next, who else do we have here? Irek, are you planning a course on knowledge monetization? If you mean any schemes, then this is definitely not my option. Let me explain why. Well, look, first of all, why is the course important? How do I teach critical information to the people who need it? Find me such an option. Well, to conduct webinars for free, for example, which I held there for the 16th, 17th, 18th year. This, of course, is very cool, but then I was in a slightly different situation, you can say so. So, As I said, as soon as you ask something in the public, this technology immediately ceases to be good. But at the same time, I understand people who don't want to pay $1,000 for a lesson. They can't afford 10 lessons now in the course. That is, pay $10,000. Well, of course, there will be a couple of dozen people. Not a problem at all, but I want more, I want scale. So for now. Next is a question from user Larry. In what form it will be? So Eric, I'm not going to go to the courses for making money. No, it's not my thing because it's, well, I can tell you something. Let's put it this way. Exactly, to prompt. But to lead by the hand, well, that's not, firstly, it's not my option. And secondly, well, it's not mine. I'm a techie, not a gypsy. I'm playing a little gypsy now, but no more. No, well, if people like it again, I repeat, I will conduct a technical lesson of the course with pleasure. In what form will Android Anti-Detect be presented? Patreon, personal, and what will be the price for it? It will be available as a free update in the personal account. It won't be in Patreon for sure, but in personal programs it will. Most likely, the same as the camera, starting with type number 6. Explain. There are certain, let's say, architectural difficulties. So Christy is the next question from Christina Kindborn. Hello, why updated only from the 4th version? When will it be updated for the 3rd version? Christina, I told you this a little earlier. You will see her in just a couple of hours on the detect.expert website. Well, because of the webinar, because of all the updates, I didn't have time to finish it. Alas, in a couple of hours it will be on the detect.expert website. So, a question, not a question, but a statement from the user Alex. We have 56 cores for proxy services. We are talking about premium. Alex, you have a great resource. You probably have cool proxies. I don't know you, alas, that's why. But in any case, I wish you success. Next is Oleg. Question from Oleg. How many times can you change the iron on one anti-detect license? Well, in general, only twice. I will explain why. Because protection from sharing kills antiquity very much. And moreover, I will say about the murder of the antique, yes. In the new version of Antique, I closed access to your fucking checkers, not yours specifically, Oleg, but in general, I appeal to everyone, to your fucking checkers like fingerprint.com. Well, honestly, they have already lured you. Well, fuck. I don't have the strength to explain that yes. How is it possible? Bitch, you're going to commit a fucking crime before you fucking rob somebody, you fucking go to the police station and you ask, look at me, look, didn't you see me? Don't you recognize me? You don't recognize it, do you? Well, I went there was a fucking robbery. Well, fuck. Well, I don't have enough strength already, so I just cut off access to checkers, and that's it. If you want to use another Antique, don't use mine. I'm already thinking about doing these new configs, damn it. Well, honestly, Fingerprint.com, of course, did me so many nerves, bitch, it's Capets. Well, as a matter of fact, about sharing and prohibitions, I, Oleg, am a little emotional, but I hope I answered your question twice. Question from user Moriarty. Greetings. Greetings, Moriarty. Which island would you recommend? It depends on why. I will not recommend anyone, because I will explain. A lot of people will watch this webinar in recording, and if a couple of hundred people come to some small hosting, then a couple of hundred people or 1,000, today now we have a lot of people left. Now we have 460 people, and there were 500. And even in the chats, people wrote that they could not get in. It was necessary to increase it to 1,000, but to be honest, I did not think. I haven't had a webinar like today. I haven't had it for a long time. We were approaching 500, then we kept falling, and today the number of 500 is holding all the time. Well, except for now in answers to questions. Therefore, I will not recommend any of the hostings. Sorry, well, it's not a problem to go to Google and find your universal. So the next question. Question from Ultramarine. X-Ray doesn't seem to support native UDP. What about Nava proxy then? There is no UDP there either. Or do I not understand something? And as in Hysteria with UDP, tell me, Vector. X-Ray and Hysteria 2 support UDP. There are no problems. Plus, you can take and check it yourself. Raise your proxy. It's done in one line of code. And for example, in anti-detection, go to the Throne classifier and drive your proxy there and check it all. In general, there are no problems with this. Next is a question from the user Korochka. Big question. Now we will read. So, will replacing the camera with a video file be a looped option or with frame preview and timeline control? Or in general, how do you see this realization? Camera photo spoofing. Some services want different camera photo resolutions. How did you implement it? I'm right now. See how the implementation works on the example of a regular image. The videos are the same shit. There is a library called libspec. It has a certain specification. We can do whatever we want with the image. Need less resolution? No sweat. Need to stretch? No sweat. Need to turn? No sweat. That is, everything rests on only one thing. On the controllers, that is, on the buttons that can be implemented, and that's it. With the video, the same crap. Now I'm working with the library that is responsible for the protocol. I say, for the MP4 codec, do whatever you want. Plus, I have an idea to implement a fix. Color verification. Do you know what color verification is? Then, when you bring the phone to your face, I beg your pardon, you bring the phone to your face and the color begins to change in front of your face. For example, red, green, blue, yellow, and so on. Here, in principle, we have the opportunity to even count this and convey it in a video. This is not a question at all. Oddly enough, this technology seems to be, wow, interesting, complex, but in fact it costs only a couple of clicks. So look, I've implemented the picture now. That is, we still have the format of the World Cup HMPG JPEG. Here, now I'll finish the video and then I'll play with the controllers. Add, because it's not a problem at all, in fact. The main thing is that the main problem is time. But I listened to the users who needed it. I don't want to get into the topic of know your customer. I still really hope that users will show through these fake webcams, I don't know, in OnlyFans. Here, but I don't want know your customer. I would not really like to get involved. Well, I mean, you understand the risks that can be. Further, why is it impossible, in your opinion, to use real PCs instead of VirtualBox for rent around the world in order not to replace some of the identifiers? Only one simple reason. It is called the PCI configuration space. The PCI configuration space won't give you the option to change any of your computer's IDs. That's the only reason. Let's move on. By the way, we're running out of time here soon, so we'll hurry up. So, some questions here, Hen. Ultramarine asked questions again. Here's the next user, Sarazo. Like Amnesia, Cloaca Protocol plus OpenVPN? If you are asking me a question, to be honest, I can't say. Because Amnesia hasn't used and won't say anything bad about it, but I have reasons not to use it. Very big reasons. So, it suits someone, please. Okay, I haven't tested it and sorry, I have nothing to do with it. This service is not for me. Next is a question from user Sergey. How to bypass the QR code when registering a Gmail email? Sergey, we have been talking about this all day today. The problem is in classification. I told you the techniques that you can use. You can use anti-detection, you can use new proxy, you can use, as I told you, just move with the server to your place of work. there are a huge number of options. Next is a question from user Pablo. Is it possible to receive payments on your cards? I made a deposit from them and I received a withdrawal from them. Pablo, there is such a possibility. But so far, this opportunity will not open. Let me explain why. Because, of course, it's very cool when money comes from some left card to my bank card, and then takes it to crypto. Great, cool. Here, but yes, of course, I know chanson, but damn, I don't know Arabic chanson. So until I learn Arabic chanson, I think there won't be such an opportunity, most likely. Next is a question from the user Ultramarine. Victor, tell me about routers for changing fingerprints. What is your opinion? I only know such a router from Quanon, a developer from Geobox, and alas, I don't know any other high-quality products. There are certain kinds of fakes that claim to be, wow, we're the best router in the world. Here. Well, in fact, it leaves much to be desired. And again, a router for changing fingerprints itself. Whom? IP, right? Okay, let's look at this point with you. Well, look, we have a router. What are we putting in this router? Socks. If we shove socks, then no matter how fucking you fuck in this router, no fucking thing will change its prints. Why? Because in the SOCKS technology, only fingerprints from the SOCKS server will be transferred, and accordingly, do what you want in your system, there, on the router, on the virtual one, it's all to the point, alas. But if you install a VPN on this router, for example, yes, then fine, then you will have all the identifiers of your router transferred in full, and indeed you can replace them. But here is just a question. And if your VPN is calculated? So again, we're working with variables here with a set of pitfalls, let's put it this way. Well, in general, in fact, this is the best option for proxying a router. Will there be any updates for the anti-detect version of Patreon? Yes, I spoke about this just a few minutes ago. The update will be available by the end of next week. Next is a question from user Dan. With your mobile proxies on SOCKS 5, it turns out you can bypass all these 3 protections? User Dan, you will need, I would recommend watching the webinar again. The fact is that in addition to the proxies themselves, you also need a proxy. And of course, well, you need to understand that if you, relatively speaking, have a very weak internet, then no matter which proxy you use, you will still have problems. Alas, at the moment I can say so, well, in this case, it no longer makes sense for me to even advertise my product. I mean proxies, because we have a crazy turnover, and if the proxies were bad, people wouldn't buy. And in fact, these are our especially data center proxies. They are good in principle, but for their own. Some people buy them in order to work. To be honest, I don't understand why. They are for a completely different purpose. Well, mobile proxies, well, the demand for them is just crazy. Well, if you compare how we are now, how many customers we have, and how many customers we had even a year ago, well, the amount, probably not the amount, more precisely, but the number has grown probably 5 or 6 times. It means that it works. I do not know. I may even have become the largest supplier of mobile products. Who knows? Therefore, you can bypass all 3 protections with my proxies, but you will need to add another good proxy. How is proxying planned in the Patreon version? Question from a user of WikiQ. WikiQ, sir? I will explain how. As I said earlier, I am currently working on the Wintune project. And the Wintune project is a completely L3 stack network adapter, and I want to shove it in and make it work fine with Tune2Socks. Yes, of course. You probably know this project because we have had it for several years. But now there is firstly its new modified good version. Secondly, the Tune2Socks project itself has little interesting in it. The coolest thing for me lies in this Vintune project. I want to make it a complete alternative to a regular network card. Here, and I really hope that I will be able to do it in time for the next Patreon update, as I said, next week. But again, I did not promise, but I will take maximum measures to make everything happen this way. So, the next question, a question from a user of FDS-VFR. And you will do the virtualization of Android mobiles, for example, through the same NOx? No, we will not do this. Why? Because I did it on the basis of VirtualBox. Why should I do with Nox? Farther. Next question. Question from a NAR user. If you disable security level in the OpenVPN settings, will it help? NAR user. Help. Like I said, I mentioned it in passing, but if you turn off encryption on OpenVPN, yes, damn, it's going to be crazy. This will be a really idea, and in fact, you absolutely don't need it. It only slows down your connection. But if you turn it off, it's great. Then you won't have traffic problems, you won't have problems with the processor, you won't just have a good, convenient ER tap adapter that encapsulates all the traffic. But to do this, you need to understand a little about OpenVPN and accordingly, of course, have access to the OpenVPN server itself. Then we have just a couple of seconds left. I apologize to everyone to whom I can't answer. Alas, from the very beginning of the webinar I warned, ask questions early. We should have finished half an hour ago. So, let's fast run. Question from Alexander. Will the cards go to bad 365? The cards will go to bad 365. But again, if there are no restrictions on two banks, these are the Netherlands and Estonia. Well, as far as I know, there are restrictions of a certain kind there. So, well, you can bind it. I hope that the anti-fraud system will not work badly in any way. Chigura, where do you live? I have been living in Dubai for a long time. Pablo, what will be the price of the course? In the region of $500. To be honest, I don't know yet. Sometimes, when the financial question comes up, I start to be wildly stupid. Sorry. So, Hustler, good time. Yedby added something to himself. It became much more difficult to work. Hustler, the same system that we discussed today, the same appeared on eBay. In fact, all. And Amazon, Facebook, well, Amazon is still more or less holding on. Facebook is definitely already FBay. Who else among the giants do we have? We added the following topic to ourselves. So, the next question. Question from James. Hi Victor, tell me the following thing. Does incognito for iPhone work like it used to be, or is it already being fired? To be honest, I don't know. I just haven't tested it. Alas, I can't tell you. So, well, let's move on. Once again, user Jacek. What are the courses? For how many hours? Small courses, only 10 hours long. 10-hour-long lectures? Well, the total duration is about 10 hours. So, a question from Korochka. What identifiers will be replaced in Android Anti-Detect? Camera, location, Wi-Fi, everything will be absolute. Plus, even the SIM card ID and signal strength. Completely everything. So, Sergey. Dmitry, how can I contact you about paid consultations? You can contact through support, Anti-Detect support, or through the detect.expert website. Farther. Hello, what user poll? Hello, what can you say about an anti-detect browser like Ghost Dolphin? Dolphin does not work at all. I will explain why. Because, you can do a very simple test. Take some site with a fingerprinting checker, save it to your local PC, and then open it in this Dolphin. You will see that it does not work. No substitutions. The Dolphin replaces only for certain domains, and that's it. He does not work with the rest. Well, at least it was like that. How much was there? A month ago, when we checked it in the Patreon chat. So, dear friends, it's already 10 o'clock in the evening my time. We have worked 2 hours today. Thank you very much for your attention. I apologize to those whose questions I did not have time to answer, but next time I hope you will be able to ask them first, and I will be happy to answer them. Thank you all very much for your attention. I was very pleased to see you, especially in such an incredible number. I'm in awe. So if you like this webinar, write somewhere in groups, and this will motivate me to conduct a new webinar in the near future. I wish you all a very pleasant Saturday evening. Goodbye, everyone. Alo bao. I love and respect everyone. All the best to you.
See you.